Hello everyone. So the next topic which we will be going to discuss is about the cell wall. So if we understand first the cell, so what is cell? Cell, it is the basic structural and functional unit of life that is called as the cell. And what is a cell wall? Cell wall is defined as a non-living component which is covering the outermost layer of the cell. So its composition vary according to the organism and and it's always permeable in nature. So cell wall is always found in the plant cells and in eukaryotes, which includes the plants and fungi, and it is also present in the cells of the bacteria, many protists, and the plants. They are surrounded by rigid cell wall. So let's discuss the the structure of the cell wall. So as you can see, this is the plant cell, and the cell wall is present in the plant cell itself. So this is a cell wall which is being present here. So it is a specialized form of extracellular matrix, and it surrounds every cell of the plant. So every plant cell, it is surrounded by the cell wall first, and then it will be surrounded by the cell membrane. So it is principally composed of cellulose, and it is one of the single most abundant polymer on the earth. So one of the single most polymer on the earth, and these are some of the cells which are surrounded by the cell wall. Moreover, the cell wall separates its interior contents of the cell from the exterior environment. So if we talk about the function of the cell wall, what it does, it provides the shape, support and protection to the cell and its organelles. So the cellular component is present exclusively in the eukaryotic plants, fungi and very few prokaryotic organisms. And if we talk about the fungi, then the cell wall of the fungi is made up of chitin, which is a derivative of glucose, and it is found in the exoskeletons of the arthropods. So this was about the uh, fungi. The next comes is the primary and the secondary cell wall. So the plant cell walls, they are being classified into two major categories, that is the primary cell wall and the secondary cell wall. So first we will discuss about the primary cell wall. The plant cells, they first secrete a very thin and flexible wall which is called as the primary cell wall. So they secrete the thin and flexible cell wall. This is known as primary cell wall. And what is it is composed of? It is being composed of 25% of the cellulose, 25% of the hemicellulose, 35% of the pectins, and 1 to 8% structural protein. So the primary cell wall consists of these constituents, and the large deviations from these values may be found. So the values which I have told you, this is the largest values which are mostly found in the primary cell wall. So when a cell gets mature, the primary cell wall will stop growing, and the function of the primary cell wall is to strengthen its wall. So some plant cells, they do not this simply by secreting hardening substances into the primary cell wall. So this is what is about the primary cell wall. Next we will discuss is about the secondary cell wall. So secondary cell wall is present between the plasma membrane and the primary cell wall. So if we talk about this, then for example, it is present between for example, this is the plasma membrane, or this is the plasma membrane, and this is the primary cell wall. So it is present between them. And secondary cell walls are more specialized in structure. They are more specialized in structure and composition as we compare it with the primary cell wall. So the secondary cell wall, it is thick and layered. For example, if we take example of a wood, there are three layers of secondary cell wall, which is referred to as S1, S2 and S3 lamellae, and they result from the arrangement of cellulose and microfibrils. So secondary walls, they contain about 45% of the cellulose and 20 to 30% of the hemicellulose, and they are often impregnated with lignin. So they are pregnated with the lignin, which is a phenolic polymer. So this was about the primary and the secondary cell wall. Now, as we have discussed in the previous slides already, that the cell walls, some of the examples or the cells which are having the cell wall are the bacteria, protists and the plants, and these are or fungi. So these are the examples where the cell wall has been given. So this is a plant cell in which the cell wall has been given. This is a bacterial cell in which the cell wall has been given. This is an animal cell, or we can consider it as a fungi also. So in this, the cell wall is not given. So the animal cells do not have the cell wall. That's why we are representing it as without the cell wall. So they have the cell membrane present in them. So the plant cells and the bacterial cells, they both have the cell wall. Next is, what are the structural components of the plant cell walls? So the structural polysaccharides, they have been divided into two major classes, that is the microfibrillar polysaccharides and the matrix polysaccharides. So these are the two major categories. Now first we will talk about is microfibrillar polysaccharides. So what is it? Microfibrillar polysaccharide, it is made up of cellulose. So it is made up of cellulose, which is a linear polymer of glucose residues. So it is a linear polymer of glucose residues. And there are several cellulose chains that associate in parallel with another to form 30 nm diameter cellulose microfibrils. So what is it? There is an extensive non-covalent bonding which is between the adjacent chains within a cellulose microfibril, which gives this structure a high tensile strength. So because of this, the high tensile strength is being maintained. So if we talk about, it is made up of cellulose. So if we talk about cellulose, cellulose is an insoluble, chemically stable and relatively resistant to chemicals and enzymatic attack. And this we have talked about cellulose. Now what about cellulose microfibril? It has been synthesized by the plasma membrane bound enzyme complex, and there is a cellulose synthase enzyme. There is a synthase enzyme which has also been there. So what it does is, in plants, it is present in the plants, and they are encoded by a gene family named as cellulose synthase A. Cellulose synthase A. So what it does is, in the expanding cells, the newly synthesized cellulose microfibrillae, they are deposited, which is parallel to the cortisol microtubules and underlining the plasma membrane. So this is what the microfibrillae polysaccharide does in the plants in case of the cell walls. So next is the another major category, that is the matrix polysaccharides. So they are embedded in a matrix which is consisting of proteins and the polysaccharides. So these are this. So major polysaccharides of the matrix, they are synthesized by a membrane bound enzyme which is in the Golgi complex. So Golgi complex is another cell organelle which is in the eukaryotic cells. So it is further being divided, the matrix polysaccharides has further been divided into two categories, that is hemicellulose and pectin. So hemicellulose, if we talk about, it is a heterogeneous group of highly branched polysaccharides, and they are hydrogen bounded to the surface of cellulose microfibrils. So this is the hemicellulose. And if we talk about pectin, pectin is also a heterogeneous groups of polysaccharides, and they are containing some acidic sugars, and pectin is basically a gel-like component which is forming the matrix, and it has several roles to play. For example, it is it plays a role in forming the connections between the plant cells. It will adjust the pH and the ion balance, and it will recognize the foreign molecules to alert the cell to the presence of microbes and establishing the cell wall porosity. So this is what a pectin does, and the hemicellulose we have discussed. So these are the two major categories of matrix polysaccharides. Next we will talk about is lignin. So what a lignin does, lignin is a phenolic polymer, and it is a highly branched polymer of three phenolic alcohols. What are the three phenolic alcohols? These are the three phenolic alcohols, and they are also known as the monolignos. So they are also known as the monolignos. These precursors of lignin, they are synthesized from the phenylalanine, which is secreted by the wall, which is secreted to the wall. It is insoluble, and it is insoluble in the water and most organic solvents. So when the lignin they forms in the wall, it displaces water from the matrix, and they form a hydrophobic network that will bound tightly to the cellulose, and they prevent the wall enlargement. So lignin, what it does is it adds significant mechanical strength to the cell wall, and it reduces the susceptibility of walls to attack by the pathogen. So this was about the lignin. Next, various structural proteins. So the cell wall also contains various kinds of structural proteins. They are usually classified according to their predominant amino acid composition. So this was all about the structural proteins. So they are classified on the basis of amino acid. For example, there are hydroxyproline rich glycoprotein, there is a glycine rich protein, then there is a proline rich protein. So these are all the categories of structural protein. And one such example we can take here is extensin, which is a major structural protein in the cell wall of the higher plants. So this was all about the structural proteins. Now we have discussed all the categories of the cell wall. We have discussed the structural components. We have discussed the various polymers, for example lignin, structural proteins. We have discussed the types of the cell walls, primary and secondary cell wall. Now what comes is next is the functions of the cell wall. So what cell wall does is, first of all, it will provide the living cells with mechanical protection and a chemically buffered environment. What it means is, the cell wall, the plant cell wall, they will provide definite shape, strength and rigidity, and it also provides the protection against the mechanical stress and the physical shocks. So next, the function of next is, it provides a porous medium for the circulation and distribution of water, minerals and other nutrient molecules. So what happens is, it controls the cell expansion due to the intake of the water. It also helps in preventing water loss from the cell, and it is responsible for transporting the substances between and across the cells. It provides the rigid building blocks between which stable structures of high orders such as leaves, stems, and it can be produced. So providing a storage site of regulatory molecules that sense the presence of pathogenic microbes, they control the development of the tissue. So what are the important main functions here are, it will provide the definite shape, strength and rigidity. It will provide protection against the mechanical stress and physical shocks. It will also help in preventing water loss from the cell. It is responsible for transporting substances between and across the cell. And last but not the least, it acts as a barrier between the interior cellular components and the external environment. So all these will form the functions of the cell wall. So these are all the references.